So Lawrence, you've been coming here since '92.
'92 was my first one.
And, you were telling me about how you saw a candidate, and the second you saw that candidate, you knew we had it. I know when we went to Iowa in 2008, by the time we got through the concourse and got out the front door and had 30 white Republicans telling us they were going to caucus for Barack Obama, we knew what direction that was going. What's your feel?
I am completely lost. So, the Biden candidacy was about safety, right? And that big lead in the polls before there was any testing was about, I want to feel safe about who this nominee is in beating Donald Trump. That safety is gone. So now what is the Biden candidacy? And if he's not where the safety is, where is the safety for the Democratic voter? Who's the person who guarantees them getting Donald Trump out of office? And I don't think the voters know that. And I don't know it.
James Carville, we talked to Reverend Al about this an awful lot. You have, out of the 20 or so Democrats that jumped in this race at the beginning, you had one from the Bill Clinton side of the party and 19 from the Bill Bradley side of the party, which means you had one guy, Joe Biden, who knew how to go into black churches in South Carolina and connect. If Biden's not in the race, suddenly the whole thing scrambled, and you start asking, who can win in South Carolina? Who can win? Who can win in other places where you need to connect with black voters?
Well, first of all, you're exactly right. The African-American voter is central to the Democratic Party. It's our largest constituency. It's not a bunch of urbanists, running around on Twitter, as you would think if you read the New York Times. I'm serious. I mean, who has the political skill when they get there to motivate? And by the way, in a general election, we got to win North Carolina. We got to win Georgia. We got to win Texas. We got to win places like that. And the party, in my opinion, has got to know who it is and who its constituents are. The other thing I would say, and I'll say this just as clearly and directly as I can, the only thing between the United States and the abyss is the Democratic Party. That's it. And if we go the way of the British Labour Party, if we nominate Jeremy Corbyn, it's going to be the end of days. If the British Labour Party would have nominated David Miliband, they'd be in power. So I am scared to death. I really am. And I think people and I think I'm waiting. I hope these African-American voters in the South, I grew up in Nippville Parish, Louisiana. I live in Orleans Parish, Louisiana. I know 10 times more African-Americans than most people I know. And they're looking for somebody that can come in and not just excite them, but talk about things that really matter to them in everyday life. They're not interested in socialism and the revolution and all that foolishness you hear. They're interested in somebody that's going to come to them and articulate a vision as to how they fit into this country and what's their relationship and what kinds of things that the schools that kids go to, the health care their parents receive, the wages they receive. That's what matters to people. And if we lose that, we're going to be the British Labour Party. We're going to be out in some theoretical left-wing la-la land. And the reason I'm for Michael Bennet is I know that given his background and his story, he's able to connect with people. We'd pick up 55 Senate seats. I'm thinking I want a big win here, but, let's see what happens in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So what exactly are you afraid of?
I'm afraid that Donald Trump is going to get reelected, and I have to do this for 4 more years, and I don't think we can make it. I really don't. Look at the way people in this country are talking to each other. Look at our relationships around the world. Look at the fact that we're budget deficit soaring and 3.5% unemployment. The country can't continue like this. And it has to have an alternative. I know, Joe, you're not a member of the Democratic Party, but you know this as well as I do. That's it. That's the only hope for America. And we have to start acting like it and act like a party and have people that have the political skill to deliver a message, to deflect a question, to reorient the narrative. You realize that Donald Trump went to Davos, Switzerland, and talked about cutting Medicare? Yeah, he did. He did. Well, I don't know why we're not blowing that up sky high. I have no idea.
I don't understand. And James, I have not understood over the past year or so. Democrats, it seems, they just don't know how to fight. I'm not a Republican anymore, and I'm looking for somebody that knows how to fight. And I'm just curious why Democrats, in this field at least, they're playing by Marcus of Queensberry rules, and they're looking at their Twitter and they're worried about what somebody might say about them instead of pounding somebody's political bones to dust. Help us, buddy.
You know, man, you and I, did I mention the fact that we beat Alabama this year? I forgot. I don't know. But at any I just had to do that.
That's the kind of hatefulness that I respect.
I understand.
You gotta go for the guy's jugular.
I know. Yeah. I understand. And the word that I like and respect and have always been proud of is politics. I'm not about a revolution. I'm not an ideologue. Politics means building coalitions. It means listening to people. It means shaping a message that you can do. It means understanding what's going on in America. It means being able to go at an African-American church and give a speech and relate to people and not talk about reparations or any kind of goofy left-wing thing out there. Talk about baby bonds. You can do that. You can do that. That's a great idea. But no one seems, there's a certain part of the Democratic Party that wants us to be a cult. I'm not interested in being in a cult. I'm 75 years old. I'm just not a very culty person. But I agree with you. You got to be able to show people what you're going to do. And, you know, so far, we'll see. I hope Michael Bennett gets out of New Hampshire. If we get down to South Carolina, we're going to make a difference.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.